Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a review of a 300 bottle limited edition from the house of January Scent Project, and this one's called Northern Flicker. And if you're familiar with woodpeckers or bird watching in general, you'll know that Northern Flicker is one of the most, I would say, successful woodpeckers in North America. We'll talk a little bit about that and how it sort of makes its mark on the scent, if you will. But since there's only going to be 300 bottles available, he's been doing these limited editions around Christmas time lately for the last couple years. Last year it was Chengmen, which I reviewed. I really enjoyed Chengmen. Chengmen is this sort of Chinese medicinal take on oud. Very unique. Some very interesting florals in there as well. You can go check out my review on this. Again, I think it was also a 300 bottle limited edition. And I believe it sold for $250, which I think is what Northern Flicker will sell for, but I don't know for sure because there is only, so he did $7 2.5 ml samples, which I think is very fair, but they sold out very quickly. So now we're just waiting on the full bottles to drop, which, if I understand it correctly, should be around Christmas time. And that's why I wanted to kind of rush this review out, so you guys would at least have something to kind of go on and go off of if you decide to purchase a bottle blind, since there's no samples. So this was sent to me as a gift by John Biebel. So believe me or don't believe what I say, I would never jeopardize my integrity for a $300 bottle. I've spent more than that on dinners. You know, this is just not worth it to me to lie about something like this as a gift. He also said, it's a gift to you. You don't have to review it. It's not like there was a quid pro quo. Obviously, with the divorce, I haven't been able to buy things lately. However, I have probably 1,000 fragrances between the bottles you see back here, samples up here, and more samples over there and over here, that I would be able to keep the channel going for the next decade if I never got anything new and I did a review every single day. So I don't need this kind of thing for the channel to continue, but I do it for the community. I want to put this out before the full bottles drop, really because there are very few people that spend this much amount of time on limited editions, rare and hard to find kind of limited editions. I really enjoy going into those because most people just ignore them, you know, or they think, only 300 bottles, it's not worth it. But as a hardcore frag head, we all know that limited editions are part of it. And I'm kind of torn on it because sometimes I feel like it creates a little bit of FOMO. On the other hand, I understand that sometimes you're working with ingredients that just can't be reproduced necessarily, or you only have a certain amount that you can make. And to use rarer or harder to find ingredients, sometimes you have to do limited editions or do them in a way where there's like a part 1 or a part 2 or a part 3. So I just don't see very many people in the community doing this type of stuff. So this is why it's kind of important for me. So it just doesn't get ignored by the general public is kind of why I do this. So like I said, unfortunately, the samples are already sold out, but bottles will be available to purchase in the next week or two around Christmas time, from my understanding, if I understand it correctly. Okay, so there is good and there is bad with this one. And we're going to talk about both sides of the coin here, but at least for someone like me that has a very large collection, there's good and bad. There is more good than bad, in my opinion, but I would say it depends on how much experience you have with this type of scent in your arsenal. You know, this type of piney, woody. Here, let me show you the picture. I put it in the thumbnail. I was holding it, but let me just show you the picture. That's the image of Northern Flicker. And many of John Biebel's fragrances from January Scent Project, one of the things, I'm going to read you the blurb so you can kind of get into the headspace of what he was thinking about whenever he made this creation. But many of his fragrances paint this very vibrant, lively, vigorous colors that kind of come to mind. The image just kind of pops into my head as I wear these. They feel so alive. That's one of the things I really like about his work. You can go watch many of my other reviews, which I reviewed off of samples, like Smolder Rose and Bervuvu and stuff like that. But many of them just feel so vigorous, vibrant, whatever the word is, natural, you know, natural and real. Like the image is just coming to your mind. And it really, that's where his work to me really shines. So let me read you the blurb. It is a little bit of a long blurb, and I like how he did the note listing. Look, he's got the top as air, the heart as bird, and the base as needles, so or trees. So we'll talk a little bit about these notes here in just a second. But let me read you the idea behind the scent. So Northern Flicker began when I opened a bottle of Pine Absolute. Smelling this particularly beautiful material brings to mind the thousands of small elements that make up a summer evening. Fireflies alight near hedges, the sun sinking slowly against the distant sky behind the trees, the increasing sounds of cicadas, crickets, mockingbirds, and gray tree frogs, Pine Absolute was at the center of stories that evolved in my mind. After some months of smelling this oil, plotting out different perfume sketches in my head, and making rough compositions, I started tracing a narrative of birds and pine trees and the world where both live together. I spent hours reading about woodpeckers. There are many birds in the Picada family, the larger bird family that includes all woodpeckers. They're found all over the world, nesting in desert cacti and drumming on trees in rainforests of Southeast Asia. Many of the woodpeckers that hunt and live in North and South America and the Caribbean will nest in dead or dying trees. It's fairly common to find woodpeckers pecking away in a hunt for grubs in pine trees that are nearing the end of its life cycle. I found myself falling into a romantic rabbit hole that many bird enthusiasts have tripped over before. The story of ivory-billed woodpeckers. This is one of the largest woodpeckers in the world and the largest in the United States. It is a beautiful bird with dark black feathers, white streaks, and a patch of bright red on its head. The last verified photos and recordings of the bird are from 1935, and the last verified sighting was in 1944, both of which occurred in the swamplands of Louisiana. Alleged sightings have been reported over the years, and great efforts have been made to find ivory bills well into this century. The evidence of sightings in the current century is vague and unreliable. It's very easy to feel a tug of emotions to realize that this lovely bird was, essentially, forced it out of its habitat and forced into extinction. The notion of a cluster of ivory-billed woodpeckers is still hiding out deep in the swamps of Louisiana or Florida starts to take on a kind of mythical hope the more that one reads and studies these birds. Moss-covered swamps, the looming pine trees and cypress, the din of the frogs and cicadas, a lonely and somber picture emerges, one that can easily pull us in. I started imagining perfumes dedicated to the ivory bills, scented treaties about the sadness of extinction, when I came upon an essay by a contemporary ornithologist who viewed this very differently. The writer's premise was that the story of the ivory bills, as much as it compels us, and as wistful as it is, takes our thoughts away from the bird species that are hovering dangerously at the brink of extinction now. Their stories become lost in the romance of finding a biological treasure or holy grail. Reading this helped awaken me from a slumber, and although I do hope that perhaps an ivory-billed woodpecker might show up again someday, I started thinking about those birds that need help right now to stay alive. Birds like the tricolor blackbird, I'm not going to even try the next one, or crested honeycreeper, the Bermuda petrel, or the Gunnison grouse. With all of this in mind, as I continue to work and study, I grew fond of one of the more common woodpeckers in the world, the Northern Flicker. It's not close to extinction, and in fact, it has thrived across North America. As more of the perfume's ingredients were sourced locally in the Americas, my kinship with this local bird was magnified. It has a lovely complex set of markings, including a spotted breast, a black bib, and glorious silhouette of feathers that are best seen when it alights from a branch to fly. This bird became the necessary second half of a pair with Pine Absolute. So this fragrance is basically built around this Pine Absolute Accord. So here's the note listing. In the top, he lists it as an air note, peppermint from the U.S., spearmint from the U.S., hedione, and bergamot. Hedione has a little bit of this fresh jasmine-like smell. A bird accord, which he lists as white musk accord, aged dark musk accord, fossilized, amber, and ginger lily. Needles, ponderosa pine from the USA, pine absolute from France, clove, poplar bud absolute, which I'm not very familiar with, antique balsam fir leaf, around 80 years old, which is kind of cool, the fact that he gets to work with kind of these rare and harder to find materials, blackcurrant leaf accord, and the base, which he lists as the tree, is vetiver java, Japanese cypress, hiba wood, cistus labdanum, rock rose, tobacco absolute, and oud from Thailand. So that's kind of the note listing, and again, that is the image right there of the fragrance, and it's actually a very good representation of the fragrance. So when you first spray, which I just did before I started the video, even though everyone keeps telling me I should spray on camera, I keep forgetting. But the opening basically starts out like you discovered some sort of like creature's nest or burrow, right? There's something very green and verdant and almost slightly pissy in the opening. And it's this menage a trois of like peppermint, blackcurrant leaf, and spearmint, okay? So those three parts kind of come together to create this tart, green, pissy. It feels almost like it's a forbidden feeling in the beginning. The beginning can be it can put you a little off balance if you're not ready for it. Now, I have worn this fragrance 4 days in a row, okay, since I've got it. This is my fourth day of wearing it in a row, which I usually get bored of fragrances. I'm not bored with this one. But I'll tell you, there is this feeling almost like you're entering like a forbidden part of the forest or something, like this feeling of violation, you know? Like you're in a part of the forest where you shouldn't be in. And there's this very unusual honeyed, balsamic, fruity undertone that I found very weird in the first 5 to 10 minutes. Probably the part that could put most people off early on is this very forward combination of peppermint and spearmint. Okay, it's very, very strong in the opening, and it comes across as medicinal cream sometimes. So if you have ever used like Bengay or Icy Hot, I didn't have any to show you, but I did have this BioFreeze. It'll kind of get you in the same thing basically. This menthol rub or whatever it is. You know, if you've ever used one of those or been around older folks who use it a lot, it has this very specific smell, okay? And this very medicinal feeling. It does go away, I would say, after 10, 15, 20 minutes. There's also oud, which I think adds to this medicinal, strange, dirty undertone, you know, this feeling of maybe being somewhere that you shouldn't be. But it's Thai oud, which is usually the fruitier, easier to digest kind. Almost like you found there's this weird sort of dirtiness, but also mixing with the freshness. And so it's almost like you found an old feather. You know how my mother used to always get on me if I touched a feather or something as a kid. She would say, yuck, dirty, you know, don't touch it. And if you've ever found one of those old feathers or like leftover fur in like an old den that an animal nested in or something, you know, there's this dirty undertone, maybe like unwashed hair smell, dirty feather. Or if you've ever had a bird, you know, birds can stink. The feathers can start to stink if the bird doesn't really take care of itself and prune itself and stuff like that. But the oud here is more internal in the creation of the scent. It's like something inside of the tree, okay? It's like it's not on the outside of the tree. So Chengmen is very specifically an oud fragrance to me. This is an oud fragrance with other stuff built around the oud. Northern Flicker is the exact opposite. It is a piney, foresty type fragrance with some tobacco absolute and all this other stuff we're going to discuss, where the oud, I would say, plays a part as that skeletal structure of just keeping the fragrance's integrity, I would say. So even though there is oud in here, this is not a nude fragrance, in my opinion. Maybe one of the reasons that it is a 300 bottle limited edition is that there is this Thai oud, which can be, maybe he used a very specific type that was rarer, hard to come across, or he only had a certain amount. That I don't know. You know, it's internal. It's not what you're used to seeing on the outside, if that makes sense. So it's not an oud fragrance through and through, but oud was used to help sort of enhance that feeling, I think, of something dirty. The bird accord, the feather accord, the fur accord, however you want to look at it. You know, something dirty in this very wide, wide world of nature. You know, you look up and you have the cleanliness of the air. And it's almost like you're a voyeur, you know, in the forest, witnessing some act of nature that no one else has seen, or maybe it's just like you alone in the forest with your pair of binoculars and the whole forest with all the animals and bugs and birds and, you know, everything that actually lives in the forest. And you start to have this realization that you are the only human there, you know, you are in isolation. You don't have any of your kind with you. And the animals who actually live in the forest are almost like watching you. You know, there's this feeling of violation, if you will. So that is the vibe that very quickly turns into this dark green, very natural, beautiful pine smell. It's December the 8th right now as I'm doing this review. And like I said, I've worn it 4 days in a row. And it's absolutely perfect for this weather. It's a little bit gloomy, slightly rainy here in Texas right now. You know, it's in the 40s or something like that. Absolutely perfect for this time of weather. Even though in the write-up, he actually listed summer, which I found very fascinating. To me, this feels like this feels like it could be a perfect Christmas Day scent also. But this very dark green, natural, beautiful pine note starts to come forward, and it will remind you of coniferous pine trees, like, you know, Christmas trees, for example. It will give that Christmas tree vibe, perfect for December wears, like I said. And wearing it as my scent of the day for the last 4 days, I can tell you it's absolutely perfect for this time of year. And what ends up happening is it mixes very well along with that peppermint / spearmint combination, which is pretty strong. and it adds this feeling of open air and sort of being in a forest with a big sky overhead. You know when you take a deep breath in the cold and you're in the forest and you take this deep breath in, and especially if you're near pine trees, evergreen trees, these sort of trees like he said in the base he used cypress. So these sort of cypress trees, the air around them almost feels, especially in winter, feels very crisp and medicinal and sharp and almost like mentholated. There's like the trees have worked as this very natural air freshener, if you will. But when you smell, you get this crisp, clean, cold winter air into your lungs. And that's what this smells like. It smells like crisp, clean air. And as that very strong, in the opening, the strength of the peppermint is what may put some people off. Because I said it can remind you of some sort of medicinal type products, if you will. But once that starts to subside, so right now we're like 16 minutes in. I sprayed literally right before I started the video. It starts to turn into this feeling of very crisp, clean, natural air. The image that I got, even though he shows this very flat feeling forest, it's almost like you're on top of a mountain and the evergreens are just purifying the air along with the elevation. So you're at 8,000 feet above sea level or whatever it is. And it just has this feeling of the whole forest kind of converging on you and giving you this experience. You're getting the forest, you're getting the trees where the bark has already began to fall off and the woodpeckers are pecking for the grubs. You're getting that clean, mentholated open air. You're getting a little bit of the medicinal feeling either from the combination of the spearmint, peppermint, or the oud. And it's a very vibrant picture, It comes to my mind very simply, very naturally. The opening with that strange peppermint gives this feeling of like, almost like discombobulation, It's almost like you're lost in the forest in a sense, but being lost is part of the journey, if that makes sense. So like you're all turned around, but you plan to be in the forest all day. So even though you're not sure where north, south, east, and west are, you're just sitting down and taking in the whole experience. You're looking at the animals. Even though they seem to know exactly where they are, you're kind of lost, but you're just kind of going with the flow. And you look internally into yourself and you look at your own compass and you seem to kind of be lost. That is kind of the feeling, And the slight animalic touches. So there's black musk, which, by the way, I assume is some sort of synthetic musk creation. I don't think he's using real musk in here, but it's very well done. For a synthetic musk composition, it's very well done. It smells like the musk and the oud, and the slight Arabic style hint that comes into the mid around an otherwise very classical French style piney, foresty vibe. Okay, that's the feeling. But if you really pay attention to the musk, you'll pick up little bits and pieces of clean, fluffy musk, like the air under the bird's wings, lifting it up or something. But then you get little bits of dirty black musk. Birds aren't necessarily clean by nature. They're not paying attention to where they're using the restroom. They leave their feathers and stuff like that. And so there's almost this contrast of the white and the black musks. And it reminded me, actually, the spots of the front of the woodpecker, even though he did this kind of minty green in the background, which really highlights, I think, the spearmint. Reminds me of this Andes mint color, and even though he highlighted the spearmint and the peppermint in the top, which play a big part of the opening, that white and black combo of the bird's chest, I think, is represented beautifully by the different types of musk here. So I think I pretty much set the scene, okay? I think you kind of understand the scent and where it's trying to go and what is transpiring around it. And it's kind of what I expected. Once I really got an idea of the fragrance, you start to notice what comes next is almost exactly what you expect if you know these type of fragrances, and that is this burnt, smoky type feeling. But unlike something like Fille aiguilles, which we'll talk about later on, and is probably one of my favorite examples of this type of perfumery. So in Fille aiguilles, to me, I've often said that it feels like you're putting your hand in the pine tar resins, and it comes across as sticky and sappy. And then in the distance, that's where you realize there's a fire in the distance, okay? It doesn't feel all around you. It feels like the fire is in the distance, but maybe you're getting slight hints of it because of the way the wind is blowing or something, but you see that the fire is far away, right? In Northern Flicker, you don't get that inherent sappy feeling because the trees feel dead, okay? It almost feels like the sap from the tree has already dried up and withered away long ago. Like the tree wishes it could produce sap, but it can't because it's too old. And it starts to feel like the trees and maybe the whole forest around you, the more you really start to tune your senses into everything, have gone through some sort of chaotic event. And maybe even the exact trees that the woodpeckers are nesting in and hunting for food and all that stuff have been burned in the recent past, okay? But it feels like the fire cleanses, just like that fresh mentholated air from the top notes add this very like, this, you just took a deep breath of very clean mountain air in, if you will. The fire feels like it cleansed everything around, like it was literally cleansed by fire, okay? And the smoky touches come across as feeling slightly ashy at times. And I think that's the reason why it adds this, almost like the tree is so fragile that it will literally like crumble at your touch, you know? Like this fire very recently really ravaged these lands, and yet maybe it wasn't strong enough to burn down all of the trees, but the ones that were left standing have this singed bark on them. And you see that the fresh leaves are starting to maybe grow out of where the old burnt ones were just eviscerated away, right? So I think this sort of stands at like a crossroads on the scent for me personally, because I really like Northern Flicker. I am a fan of everything, even the very simplistic bottle. It's funny, when I unboxed it, I was talking about Amouage's bottle, which I unboxed it on an Amouage review. I think it was Outlands. I can't remember. I think it was Outlands. And I remember talking shit about the Amouage bottle, as I think it's rightly so. To be fair, I haven't held it in my hand, but the whole like you're putting the that little thing on the bottom, the plaque on the bottom of the bottle. I don't know. The whole bottle just seems meh to me, you know? And then you have this, which is a very simple stock bottle, but he's created the logo with the star that looks like maybe the star I have on top of my Christmas tree right now. And you have this beautiful emerald green feeling on the top and the green juice. And I think this is a beautiful presentation in nothing but a simple stock bottle, you know? But I stand at a crossroads because I really like this scent a lot. Any composition that naturally just takes my mind to this picture book tour, where I can literally see the forest and smell the fire leftovers, the ashiness, the mentholated coolness in the air, see the literal animal den and the slightly animalic touches from the musk and the oud, maybe even this a slight berry meets like plastic bag element to the oud, which is very interesting because my mind goes down these kind of side roads. I go to this perfume nerd kind of place from time to time. If you've ever seen animals incorporating our trash into their nests, it's a very strange feeling. Like, have you ever seen a bird like use cigarette butts to line the inside of their nests, or pieces of plastic or cloth, or like plastic bags or something as part of their nest? It just brings another dimension to the thought that everything we do kind of affects everything else, and it brings it back to that woodpecker that was basically extinct. But it just adds another dimension to it, to the thought everything we do affects everything else. And any scent that can naturally sort of bring these thoughts into my head, to me, is a winner. These thoughts, these pictures, any scent that I can wear 4 days in a row and not get bored with is a winner. And I also really love that alien feeling to the forest, how it almost makes you feel like you're a guest in their forest, the animals who live there call it home and you're just visiting, kind of thing. It feels like trying to ride a horse underwater or something. Even if you're a great equestrian, even if you're a seasoned horse rider, all it takes is one variable to throw everything off. Try riding the horse underwater. Good luck with that, right? There is something in this that just makes it seem alien. It makes it feel a little wrong, discombobulated. It throws you off balance, And I love that about this. However, on the other side of the coin, and this is the big however, this scent sort of explores this pine absolute, different pine with the, the different woods in there, which he mentioned that he used things like vetiver java, which adds this woody earthiness, maybe even slightly smokiness, Japanese cypress, and these different types of foresty, woody, piney type feelings. That has been done many a times, over and over and over. And a few examples that I would consider best in class. I already mentioned Fille and aiguilles as like one of the gold standards to me. The other one is Arso. Both of these I will review on the channel one of these days, okay? They both deserve full reviews. And I adore these creations. I adore these type of fragrances, these green, piney, woody fragrances. They're perfect for this time of year, for me personally. And these are kind of gold standard. These are two gold standard fragrances for me. You know, I adore both of them. And actually, Northern Flicker fits as neatly as a breakfast egg in a Lord's Cup fits. I mean, this fits perfectly into this category, okay? The problem is, I already own Fille and Aiguille and Arso, and actually, I have a backup of Fille and Aiguille. I love it so much. So I have a second bottle of this, and you can see how much of this I've used. So, even wearing something like Polo Green, in my opinion, you know, which I will also do a Vintage Hall of Fame review on this. I think I have 3 or 4 bottles of this. One is a Warner bottle from way back in the day. The rest are Cosmere. This is a Cosmere release right here. And so this gives me that dark pine tobacco combination, which feels so masculine and satisfies my craving. Even something like Polo Crest, you know? Even though it doesn't have, I don't think, the tobacco, it does give me the pine hit but I prefer the original. So I think that if you would say, Ramsey, you know, you have to spend your own money on this, $250. Let's say it's priced the same as Chengmen. It's $250 for, I think it was 50 mils. Let me see if I can see that. Limited editions. Let's see if it shows. Limited editions. Chengmen was, okay, maybe it's not going to say. Okay, yeah. So it was $250 for 50 mils. And I think this is the same. I think this is 50 mils. So let's say it's priced at $250. If I had to spend $250 of my own money on this, as much as I like it, I don't think I would because of where my collection is at, okay? So I would probably just wear Fille and Aiguille. I mean, honestly, this is a Christopher Sheldrake, and it's just, I mean, it checks all of the boxes. Does it do exactly what Northern Flicker does? No. You know, does it have the oud or the musks? I don't believe so. You know, but even though they're not exactly the same, they're close enough that I would wear Arso or something like Fille and Aiguille and get the same feeling, you know? So the only thing I will say is you have to be a little careful if you have these amazing pine foresty like scents in your collection already. If you have a big collection, this could be considered a little bit redundant. However, with that being said, if you don't have some of these in your collection and you're looking for something that would fill that gap, I could easily recommend this. I mean, it is it's a beautiful creation. Outside of the redundancy, I love the smoke. I love the pine. I love that discombobulated feeling with the mentholated, clean air, crisp feeling, you know? And even though he talks about summer, I think it's a perfect winter release. So again, I mean, the star on the top, reminding me of the star on top of my Christmas tree. That's all you need to, that's the perfect analogy right there. Amazing pine foresty fragrance with that feeling of the bird in there, the animals, the inside of the forest, all that stuff. It brings many dimensions to the table. So that's kind of my take. Like I said, some good, some bad. Believe me, don't believe me, it's up to you. But I appreciate everyone who watches, comments, likes, subscribes, all that stuff. I wouldn't be able to do this review if not for the generosity of John Biebel. So thank you for sending this my way, John. It's been a pleasure getting to know your work as always. And I believe this will be released in the next week or two. So just keep an eye out. Even though it says sold out right now, they're just talking about the samples. So the bottles should be available very, very soon. So anyways, appreciate everyone watching. If you have any experience with this or have interest in it, let me know. As always, it's a pleasure. Cheers, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.